The alien city of Nerith was full of shining towers, bright lights, and proud faces. But for one young alien girl, it was nothing but cold walls and cruel voices. Her name was Lyra, and though she looked like the others of her kind, there was always something about her that made them turn away. Her body was weaker, her movements slower, and her eyes carried a softness that her people called weakness. Every day, as Lyra walked through the market, whispers followed her. "There she is again," one alien woman muttered. "She cannot even carry water jars." Another laughed. Lyra heard it all. She kept her head low, clutching a small basket with trembling hands. Her heart pounded, not from the weight of the basket but from the shame pressing against her chest. She was used to being ignored, but the laughter cut deeper than any blade. Her home was no better. In the crowded quarters of the city, families sat together, shared food, and talked with pride about their children. But when Lyra entered, silence often filled the room. Even her own relatives treated her like an empty shadow. To them, she was a burden, a reminder of imperfection in a society that demanded strength and perfection above all else. One evening, as the sky glowed with the purple hue of twin suns setting, Lyra tried to help at the water well. She lifted a jug, but her arms shook, and before she could take 2 steps, it slipped from her hands. The clay shattered on the ground, water spilling into the dirt. The crowd around her burst into laughter. "Pathetic!" someone shouted. "Even a child is stronger than her." Another voice echoed. Lyra's cheeks burned. Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced them back. She wanted to scream, to tell them she was not useless, that she was more than their cruel words, but no sound left her lips. Instead, she turned and ran. Her feet carried her away from the marketplace, past the glowing lights, until she reached the empty edge of the city where the shadows grew longer and silence finally wrapped around her. There, alone, she sat on a stone. Her knees pressed to her chest, her arms wrapped tight as if to shield herself from the world. She whispered to herself, "Why was I even born here? Why do they hate me so much?" Her voice was broken, carried away by the wind. The stars began to appear above, one by one, bright in the black sky. She looked at them with longing. Somewhere out there, she thought maybe there was a place where she was not hated. Maybe there was someone who would see her not as weak, but as worthy. But those were only dreams, and dreams did not change the way her people treated her. The next day was no different. As she walked through the market, a group of young aliens blocked her path. One of them smirked and shoved her shoulder, making her stumble. "Move, useless one," he sneered. The others laughed as she fell to the ground, her basket spilling its small contents of dried roots. She scrambled to pick them up, her hands shaking. The crowd didn't help. They only watched, some with cold indifference, others with cruel smiles, and then it happened. Through the crowd, a tall figure appeared, different, unfamiliar. The being's skin was not blue or scaled like the others, but pale and soft. His clothes were strange, simple compared to the fine robes of the aliens. His eyes, though, were sharp and filled with something none of them had shown her before. Concern. It was a human, one of the few who had traveled into Nerith's trade district. Most aliens treated humans as primitive or odd, barely worth attention. But this human did not ignore the scene. He pushed past the laughing crowd and bent down beside Lyra, his voice calm yet firm. "Are you hurt?" Lyra froze. No one had ever asked her that before. Not once in her life. The crowd snickered. "Why do you care for her?" one alien mocked. "She is worthless." Another added, but the human ignored them. He gently helped Lyra pick up her scattered roots, his hands steady, his movements slow so she would not feel rushed. Lyra looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with confusion. She expected him to laugh at her too, or to drop the roots and walk away. Instead, he offered her the basket back and smiled just a little. "You don't deserve their cruelty," he said softly. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt something strange. Not pity, not mockery, something warmer, something she had never known before. kindness. The crowd began to whisper again, this time not about her but about the human who dared to defend her. Some looked angry, others amused. But the human stood tall, placing himself slightly between her and them as if protecting her from their eyes. Lyra's heart raced. She didn't even know his name, yet in that single moment, something inside her changed. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was not alone in this universe. The crowd around the market grew restless. Aliens whispered and pointed, their voices sharp like knives. They could not believe what they were seeing. A human, a stranger from another world, bending down to help the weakest among them. To them, it was laughable, almost insulting. But to Lyra, it was like a piece of sunlight breaking into her long night. The human stood beside her, calm and steady. His name was Daniel, though she did not know it yet. His eyes moved across the crowd, meeting the stares without fear. He said nothing to them. Instead, he offered his hand to Lyra. Come on, he said gently. You don't have to stay here. Lyra stared at his hand. Her people had never reached out to her like that. Hands had only ever pushed her, shoved her, or taken things from her. To see one offered in kindness, it was strange, almost frightening. For a moment, she hesitated. What if it was a trick? What if he was just mocking her in a new way? But the warmth in his eyes was different. There was no cruelty hiding there. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, and protective. The crowd murmured in disapproval. Some laughed, others sneered, but Daniel ignored them completely. As he helped her stand, one alien from the group that had mocked her stepped forward. His voice was loud and cruel. Why waste your strength on her, human? She is nothing but shame to us. Leave her. Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned his head slightly, his voice low but strong. Then maybe you should be ashamed, not her. The crowd went silent for a second, stunned by the human's boldness. No one had ever spoken to them like that, certainly not in defense of Lyra. She stood frozen, her heart thundering in her chest. No one had ever chosen her side before, not once in her entire life. The alien scoffed and turned away, muttering something under his breath, but he did not challenge Daniel further. The others backed off too, though their eyes still burned with anger and disbelief. Daniel led Lyra away from the market, guiding her gently through the streets until the voices faded behind them. They stopped at the edge of the district, where the noise of the market was only a faint echo. Lyra pulled her hand back, nervous and unsure. She kept her eyes low, her voice almost a whisper. Why did you do that? Why help me? Daniel looked at her for a moment. His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact. Because you needed help. That's reason enough. His words struck her like lightning. To him, it was simple. To her, it was impossible. No one in her life had ever thought she was worth helping. She felt her chest tighten, a mix of fear, confusion, and something else she couldn't name. You don't even know me, she said quietly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Daniel gave a small smile. I don't need to. I know what cruelty looks like. And I know what care should look like. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Lyra wanted to believe him, but the voice of her people still echoed in her mind. Worthless, weak, shame. Those words had chained her for so long that she didn't know if she could break free. Daniel noticed her hesitation. He crouched slightly so his eyes were level with hers. Listen, he said, his tone gentle but firm. You're not what they say you are. I saw strength in you, standing there and enduring all of that. Most people would have broken long ago. You didn't. Her throat tightened. No one had ever called her strong before. Still, she shook her head. You don't understand. My people, they don't want me. Even my family. I don't belong anywhere. Daniel's expression softened. His eyes carried a weight, a history of his own. Then maybe you belong with those who can see your worth. And if they can't see it, that's their blindness, not yours. The words wrapped around her heart, fragile but powerful. She didn't know how to answer. Before she could speak, a sudden sound echoed from behind. a group of aliens approaching. Their heavy steps and sharp voices filled the street. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, his body tense. Ready. The group of aliens stopped a few feet away, glaring at the human. One of them, clearly a leader, sneered, "You should not interfere in our ways, off-worlder. She is nothing to us. Let her rot in her weakness." Daniel's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped, steady as steel. "Then you should be glad someone else is willing to give her a chance." The leader hissed, baring sharp teeth. The tension in the air grew heavy, like a storm about to break. Lyra's heart pounded. If they attacked, Daniel would be outnumbered. She had seen these same aliens hurt others before. Her chest tightened with fear, not for herself, but for him. But Daniel did not back down. He stood tall, his stance unshaken. The aliens stared at him for a long moment, waiting, testing. Then, with a final snarl, the leader spat on the ground and motioned for his group to leave. They walked away, muttering, their eyes still filled with hatred. When they were gone, Daniel turned back to Lyra. His calm expression returned, though his jaw was still tense. "You're safe now," he said softly. Lyra could hardly breathe. This stranger, this human, had stood against her own people for her. No one had ever done that. Not once. She felt something stir deep inside her chest. A spark of trust, fragile but real. She looked at him with wide eyes and whispered, Why do you care?" Daniel gave her a gentle smile, one that carried no judgment, no pity, only truth. Because everyone deserves care, even those the world ignores. At that moment, Lyra felt the first fragile thread of hope weave into her heart. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if this kindness would last. But for the first time, she felt like maybe she was not completely invisible in this vast universe. The streets of Nerith slowly grew quieter as the suns dipped below the horizon. Strange lights glowed along the towers, and shadows stretched across the alien city. Lyra walked beside the human, Daniel, still clutching her basket close to her chest. Her steps were small, nervous, but she did not pull away from him. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen to walk with her, not against her. They reached the outer edges of the market, where the crowd was thin and the air smelled of smoke and metal from trade ships. Lyra glanced at him, her voice soft. "You should not have done that. They will not forget. My people. They will make you regret helping me." Daniel glanced down at her. His tone was calm, but firm. "Let them try. I've seen worse than their glares." He didn't explain what worse meant, but something in his eyes told Lyra he carried battles of his own. They walked a little farther until Daniel stopped in front of a small outpost, a human supply shelter set up on the edge of the city for visiting traders. The building was simple, made of steel walls with a glowing beacon at the top. It was nothing compared to the grand alien towers, but it felt safer, warmer somehow. "Come inside," Daniel said, pushing the door open. Lyra froze. Her heart raced. No one had ever invited her anywhere before. Not into their homes, not into their tables, not into their lives. She stood still, unsure if she even had the right to step in. Daniel looked back, his brow furrowing. "You're safe here. I won't let them touch you." The firmness in his voice gave her courage. Slowly, she stepped inside. The room was small but full of life. Shelves lined with supplies, crates stacked in corners, and a faint hum of human machines filled the air. A warm lamp glowed in the corner, and for the first time in years, Lyra felt the weight on her shoulders lift slightly. It was not much, but it was shelter. Shelter she had never known. Daniel pulled out a chair near a table and motioned for her to sit. She obeyed quietly, clutching her basket in her lap as if it was a shield. Her wide eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, the strange human food packs, the odd water purifier, and the neat, simple bed against the wall. Daniel moved to the shelf, pulled out a small packet, and set it in front of her. "You haven't eaten, have you?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. She didn't answer, but the truth was written on her face. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but shame kept her silent. Her people had often denied her meals, leaving her to eat scraps. She had grown used to hiding her hunger. Daniel opened the packet, revealing small bread-like rations and a container of water. He slid them toward her. "Eat," he said simply. Her hands trembled as she reached out. For a moment, she expected him to snatch it back or laugh at her desperation. But he didn't. He only waited patiently. Slowly, she lifted the bread to her lips and took a small bite. The taste was strange, different from alien food but warm and filling. A tear slid down her cheek before she realized it. Daniel noticed. He didn't comment, didn't ask. He simply let her eat. When she finally put the packet down, she whispered, "Why are you doing this? No one has ever cared before." Daniel leaned back in his chair. His expression was calm, almost tired, but his voice carried quiet strength. "Because it's the right thing to do. Where I come from, we don't leave people to suffer just because they're different." Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the years of shame whispered back. "But I am weak. They are right about me. I can't do the things others can. I only bring shame." Daniel shook his head, his tone sharp now. "No, weakness is not shame. Shame belongs to those who refuse to show kindness. You're not the problem, they are." His words struck her like a spark. For a long time, she sat in silence, staring at the table. A strange warmth spread through her chest. It was not just the food, not just the shelter, it was something deeper. For the first time, someone had stood beside her without demanding she change. Someone had given without mocking. But safety never lasted long in Nerith. That night, as darkness covered the city, shadows moved outside the outpost. Alien voices whispered in the streets, angry and sharp. A group had gathered, furious at the human who dared protect their outcast. Their footsteps echoed, their silhouettes sharp against the glowing beacon. Inside, Lyra stiffened. She recognized the voices, the same young aliens who had shoved her in the market. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, fear rising. "They came," she whispered. "They will hurt you. They always hurt anyone who stands near me." Daniel stood, calm but alert. He moved toward the door, checking the lock. His hand rested on his belt, where a small human weapon hung. His eyes hardened. "Let them come," he said quietly. Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted to stop him, to tell him it wasn't worth it. But another part of her, a part long buried, did not want him to leave her side. She had lived her whole life in silence, in shame, in loneliness. But tonight, someone had given her food, warmth, and words she had never known. "You deserve care." And now, as shadows gathered outside, she realized something terrifying but powerful. For the first time, she was afraid not for herself, but for the human who had shown her kindness. The night around the human outpost grew tense. The beacon light above flickered faintly, throwing long shadows across the dirt road. Outside, the voices of the alien youths grew louder, their words sharp and full of hate. Lyra sat frozen at the small table, her hands gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her heart raced with fear, not for herself, but for Daniel. Daniel stood near the door, his tall frame calm but alert. His eyes moved toward the window, where dark shapes flickered just beyond the glass. He could see them circling, waiting, gathering courage. His hand rested near his weapon, but he didn't draw it yet. Violence was always the last choice for him. "Stay behind me," he said firmly, his voice steady. Lyra's throat tightened. "They won't stop. They'll hurt you. They'll call others." Daniel glanced back at her, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "Let them. They need to learn someone is willing to stand where you stood alone." Her chest ached at those words. No one had ever said such a thing for her. For a moment, she almost believed him completely. Then the pounding began. Heavy fists slammed against the metal door. Voices shouted through the night. "Come out, human! Leave the weakling and get out of our city. She does not belong here." The noise rattled the walls, but Daniel did not flinch. He stepped forward and pulled the door open himself. The aliens outside staggered back, surprised by his boldness. Daniel stepped onto the threshold, his figure outlined against the warm glow from inside. "What do you want?" His voice rang out, calm but strong. The leader, the same alien who had mocked Lyra earlier, pushed forward. His sharp teeth gleamed in the dim light. "You disgrace our streets, off-worlder. That girl is worthless. She brings shame on us all. If you protect her, then you share her shame." The crowd behind him murmured, their eyes burning with cruel amusement. They expected the human to back down, maybe to push Lyra away and save himself. But Daniel did not move. His voice was low, steady, carrying a weight that silenced even some of their laughter. "She is not worthless. You are," he said, his eyes locked on the leader. "Strength without mercy is weakness. Power without care is cowardice. She has endured more than any of you. That makes her stronger than all of you combined." A hush fell over the group. Lyra, standing just inside the doorway, felt her chest tighten with emotion. No one had ever spoken for her like this. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. The leader snarled, stepping closer. "You think your words matter here? You think you can change our ways? You are just a human. You don't belong." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't step back. "Maybe I don't belong," he admitted, "but I know cruelty when I see it, and I know that kindness is worth more than your pride. If protecting her makes me an outsider, then I'll stand outside gladly." The alien hissed, raising a clawed hand as if to strike. The crowd leaned forward, eager for violence. Lyra gasped, her fear overwhelming. She wanted to run, to hide, to stop him, but her feet refused to move. Daniel didn't flinch. He stood tall, his eyes unwavering. At the last second, his hand darted to his belt, pulling free a small human device. It wasn't a weapon meant to kill. It was a shock baton, short and humming with energy. He raised it just enough for the aliens to see the sparks dance at its edge. The leader froze, his sneer faltering. He had expected fear, not defiance. Daniel's voice cut through the night, sharp as steel. "Touch her, and you'll find I am not as weak as you think." The crowd wavered. Some shuffled back, murmuring in uncertainty. The leader's eyes narrowed, fury flashing, but he knew the risk. The human would not be an easy target. After a tense silence, he spat on the ground. "This isn't over," he growled, signaling his group to leave. "She will never belong. And you, human, you will regret this." One by one, the aliens melted back into the shadows, their angry voices fading with their steps. The road grew quiet again, leaving only the faint hum of the beacon above. Daniel lowered the baton and stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by Lyra's shaky breathing. She stared at him, her eyes wide with both fear and awe. You stood against all of them," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel looked at her, his expression calm. "Someone had to," he said simply. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her chest. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now, but for the first time, they were not only tears of pain. There was something else there, something like hope. She whispered again, almost to herself, "No one has ever chosen me before." Daniel's gaze softened. He placed the baton aside and sat across from her at the table. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "Then let tonight be the first time, and not the last." The warmth of those words filled the small shelter. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a strange strength inside her. Not the kind her people valued, not physical power, but something deeper. The strength of being seen, of being defended, of being worth standing for. As the night settled, she realized something she had never dared believe. Maybe she was not broken. Maybe she was not shame. Maybe, with this human beside her, she could learn what it truly meant to be strong. The night passed slowly in the human shelter. Outside, the city was quiet, but Lyra could not sleep. She sat curled up on the small chair, her eyes fixed on the floor, her thoughts heavy. Every echo of the earlier shouting still rang in her mind. The memory of claws raised against Daniel, the sneers of her people, the hatred in their voices. It all weighed on her chest. But stronger than the fear was the image of Daniel standing in the doorway, unshaken. He had faced them all. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. For her. Daniel moved around the shelter quietly, checking the locks, adjusting the beacon, making sure everything was secure. When he noticed Lyra still sitting wide awake, he walked over. His voice was calm, low, almost careful. "You should rest. You're safe here tonight." Lyra shook her head. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "I don't know how to sleep when safety feels strange." Daniel paused at that. His eyes softened, but he did not press her further. Instead, he reached into a kit and pulled out a small scanner device. Its light glowed faint blue as he knelt in front of her. "Then let me at least check something," he said. Confused, she tilted her head. "Check." Daniel raised the device gently toward her arm. "Your body. I noticed earlier you're weaker, slower. Do they ever give you proper care?" Lyra stiffened, shame rising in her throat. She wanted to lie, to say yes, but the truth slipped out in a whisper. "No. They said I don't deserve it." Daniel's jaw tightened. His silence was heavy, filled with anger he kept buried. He activated the scanner, and soft waves of light passed over her. Numbers and symbols appeared on the small screen. His brow furrowed as he studied them. "You're malnourished," he finally said. "Your body lacks basic nutrients. That's why you're weak. Not because you're broken, because they starved you." The words hit Lyra harder than she expected. All her life she believed her weakness was natural, her fault, her curse. But Daniel's tone was firm, almost certain, as if the truth was undeniable. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "So, it wasn't me?" Daniel met her eyes. His voice carried no doubt. "No, it was them. They failed you. They abandoned you. That's not your weakness. It's theirs." Her breath caught. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time they were mixed with something new, relief. She had carried blame for so long that the idea it had never been hers felt like a crack of light through a thick wall. Daniel moved to a crate and pulled out a small package. Inside were sealed nutrient packs, human medicine for survival missions. He placed one on the table. "Eat this every morning," he said, "and your strength will return. Slowly, but it will return." Lyra looked at the packet as if it were treasure. Carefully, she picked it up, her fingers brushing the edges. No one had ever given her something for her health, not once in her life. She whispered, "Why do you care so much?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. His gaze was steady, but his voice softened. "Because you deserve a chance to live. Everyone does. You've been denied that chance long enough." Her throat tightened. She pressed the packet against her chest as if holding on to his words. A strange warmth spread through her body. Trust, fragile, delicate, but real, began to grow. The next day, Daniel showed her simple exercises to rebuild her strength. Small movements at first, lifting her arms, stretching, walking a few steps across the room. Lyra felt clumsy and weak, but Daniel never laughed, never scolded. He only encouraged. "Good. That's enough for now. Tomorrow, a little more." Each word built her confidence piece by piece. She had spent her life being told she was nothing, but here was someone who believed she could become more. Still, doubts lingered. That evening, as she sipped water Daniel had purified, she finally asked, "What if they come again? What if they hurt you because of me?" Daniel looked at her with quiet certainty. "Then I'll stand again, because it's not about me. It's about doing what's right. And you're worth it." The words shook her to the core. No one had ever called her worth it. That night, when she lay down on the small cot Daniel had offered her, she stared at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. Fear still lived in her heart, but for the first time, it shared space with something stronger, trust. She trusted him. She didn't understand why, but she did. Outside, shadows moved in the city, whispers of unrest growing among her people. Daniel had challenged their pride, and they would not forget. Lyra knew danger would come again. But as she closed her eyes, holding the nutrient packet close, she also knew something else. For the first time, she was not alone in facing it, and that single truth gave her a strength she had never known before. Days passed quietly in the small human shelter, though tension in the city grew heavier with each sunrise. Lyra could feel it whenever she walked with Daniel through the outskirts. Stares from strangers, whispers in the streets, the way merchants pulled their children closer when she passed. She was used to such treatment, but now, with Daniel beside her, the hatred seemed sharper, angrier. The human had embarrassed them. He had spoken against their pride. And that, in Nerith, was unforgivable. One evening, as the twin suns dipped low and the purple light spread across the towers, a group of alien guards arrived at the outpost. Their armor gleamed, and their tall spears hummed with energy. Behind them walked a high-ranking counselor, robed in silver, his face cold and stern. Lyra froze the moment she saw them. Her chest tightened, fear flooding her veins. The council never came for someone like her, not unless punishment was near. Daniel stood at the doorway, his expression calm but alert. "What do you want?" he asked. The counselor's gaze swept past Daniel and landed on Lyra. His lips curled with disgust. "We come for the outcast," he declared. "She has broken no law, but her shame brings dishonor to us all. And you, human, you dare defy our ways. You are to leave our city at once. The girl will remain here, as she always has, rejected and forgotten." Lyra's knees weakened. She wanted to speak, but the weight of so many years pressed her silent. She expected Daniel to step aside, to avoid conflict with authority. That was what everyone else had always done. No one chose her. But Daniel didn't move. His stance was firm, his voice steady. "No," he said simply. "She's coming with me." The crowd that had gathered gasped. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably. Defying the council was unheard of. Lyra's eyes widened, her heart racing. Daniel had just thrown himself into danger for her. The counselor narrowed his eyes, his voice sharp as steel. "You do not understand, off-worlder. She is not one of worth. She does not deserve protection. To keep her is to insult us all." Daniel took a step forward, his tone rising. "Then maybe you should be insulted, because I won't abandon her. Not now, not ever." The words struck Lyra like thunder. Her chest ached, her throat tight. For so long she had believed she was a burden, something to be cast aside. Now, someone stood before the most powerful voices of her people and declared she was worth keeping. The counselor's face twisted in anger. "You leave us no choice. Guards, arrest him. The girl stays." The soldiers stepped forward, their spears raised. Lyra's body trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to let Daniel face this alone. But then she saw his eyes, calm, steady, unyielding, and something inside her broke free. For the first time in her life, she stepped forward. Her voice, usually soft and hesitant, rang clear. "No!" The guards paused, stunned. Lyra's chest rose and fell as she forced the words out. "I will not let you take him. You have shamed me all my life. You have laughed, ignored, and beaten me. But he—" She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. "He gave me food. He gave me shelter. He told me I deserve to live. And I do. I am not your shame. I am your failure, for you never cared when he did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Never had the outcast raised her voice. Never had she spoken against the council. Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at her. Pride shone quietly in his gaze, though he said nothing. This was her moment. The counselor's face darkened with fury. "Silence, girl. You disgrace us further." But Lyra did not back down. Her legs trembled, but her voice grew stronger. "No, I will not be silent anymore. If you want him, you will have to go through me." The guards hesitated, unsure. To strike an outcast was one thing. To strike one who spoke boldly before the council was another. Whispers spread among the onlookers, doubt flickering like sparks. Daniel stepped closer to Lyra, standing at her side. His voice was low, steady, but carried across the crowd. You see? She has more courage than any of you. She has faced your hatred her entire life and still stands. And you call her weak? No. She is stronger than your pride, stronger than your cruelty. She chooses her voice tonight, and I stand with her. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the guards' spears. The counselor clenched his jaw, but he saw the uncertainty in the crowd. To punish them both now would be dangerous. To silence them might create more questions than he could answer. With a sharp motion of his hand, he signaled the guards to step back. His voice was bitter, filled with venom. This is not finished. You will regret your defiance, human. And you, girl, you will find no welcome among us. With that, he turned and stormed away, his guards following. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers lingering in the air like smoke. Inside the shelter, silence fell again. Lyra collapsed into a chair, her legs shaking, her breath uneven. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said softly. You chose to stand. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were not of shame. They were of pride. For the first time, she had not hidden, had not bowed. She had spoken, and the world had listened. I was so afraid, she whispered. But when I saw you face them, I thought maybe I could too. Daniel gave her a small smile. And you did. That was your strength, not mine. In that moment, Lyra realized something she had never dared to believe. Her voice mattered. And with Daniel beside her, she would never be silent again. The night after the council's visit was heavier than any before. The streets of Nerith were quiet, but it was not peace. It was the silence of watchful eyes, of whispered rumors, of anger boiling beneath the surface. Inside the small human shelter, Lyra sat at the edge of the cot, her hands clasped tightly together. Her chest still throbbed with the memory of standing before the council, of hearing her own voice ring out in defiance. She had never imagined such words could leave her lips, but now doubt crept back in. What if they return? What if they punish you because of me? She whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel leaned against the wall across from her, arms folded, calm as ever. Then they return, and I'll be ready. But listen to me, Lyra. What you did today was more powerful than any weapon. You stood, you spoke, and they listened. That's something they cannot erase. Her eyes lifted to him, uncertain but hopeful. Do you really think it matters? Daniel's gaze was steady. I know it does. You've lived under their shadow all your life. Tonight, you showed them a light they can't ignore. The words sank into her heart like seeds in dry soil. For the first time, she wondered if her existence wasn't meant to be silent suffering. Maybe she had a role to play. The next day, whispers spread through the city faster than flame through dry grass. The story of the outcast who spoke against the council reached every corner. Some mocked her even more, calling her a fool, a disgrace. But others, quiet voices, hidden in the crowds, began to wonder. If she could stand, why couldn't they? By evening, another crowd had gathered near the shelter. Daniel tensed at first, expecting more violence. But this time it was different. In the front stood a mother holding a thin, sickly child. Her eyes, tired but desperate, met Lyra's. They told me he was weak, the mother whispered, her voice breaking. They told me to leave him behind. But you stood up. You said weakness is not shame. Tell me, outcast, can it be true? Lyra froze. Her throat tightened, her heart pounding. She had no training, no power, no authority. She was no healer, no leader. She was just the girl everyone mocked. But Daniel's quiet voice filled the silence. Speak, Lyra. They need your truth. Her hands shook, but she stepped forward. She looked at the child, thin, his skin pale, his body trembling just like hers used to. Slowly, she knelt beside him. Her voice was soft, but clear. You are not shame. You are not a burden. You are alive, and that means you deserve care. Just like me. The mother's eyes filled with tears. The child looked at her with wide, hopeful eyes. Around them, the crowd murmured. Some sneered, but others fell silent. their expressions shifting. For the first time, someone had dared say what they all feared, that their pride was cruelty, that their strength was empty without compassion. Daniel stepped up beside Lyra, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice carried across the gathering. This is what you refuse to see. Kindness is strength. Mercy is strength. And if you call that weakness, then weakness will outlast you. The crowd shifted uneasily. The council's authority was strong, but whispers of change had begun. And it had started with the outcast they had all ignored. That night, when the crowd dispersed, Lyra sat quietly at the table, her heart full of emotions she couldn't name. She looked at Daniel, tears brimming in her eyes. Why me? Why did you choose me? Daniel leaned forward, his eyes warm but steady. Because you deserved it. Because no one else would. And because sometimes it takes just one voice, one spark, to light a fire. Her lips trembled, but then a smile formed, small, uncertain, but real. For the first time in her life, she felt more than hope. She felt purpose. Days turned into weeks. Lyra's body grew stronger with Daniel's help. The nutrient packs restored her health, and her voice grew bolder with each passing day. More and more people came quietly to her. Those who had been silenced by shame, those cast aside for weakness. She spoke to them as Daniel had spoken to her, offering words that were simple but powerful. You deserve care. You are not shame. The council still glared from their towers, still whispered threats, but they did not act. For they knew now that striking her down would only prove her words true. One evening, as the stars burned bright above, Lyra stood outside the shelter beside Daniel. She looked at the city that had once felt like a prison. Now it looked different, still cruel, still flawed, but not unbeatable. She turned to Daniel, her voice steady. You gave me shelter. You gave me care. But more than that, you gave me back myself. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to keep standing. Not just for me, for all of them. Daniel gave a small smile, the kind that carried both pride and quiet certainty. Then stand. And I'll stand with you. The stars reflected in her eyes as she lifted her chin. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like an outcast. She felt like a beginning, not shame, not weakness, but hope.